Hey all, and welcome to today's panel, Away with Words. Today we're going to be talking about something that there's a lot of in my writing, pain. As you know, I write about an assassin, so a lot of fight scenes, a lot of injuries and wounds and all of that. So I find myself struggling to avoid the repetitious descriptions of pain. So I have to do a lot of research to find different ways to say it and to describe it and all of that. So I got some of my fellow author friends to help me figure out better ways to do it. Heidi, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Heidi Angel, and I am the author of the urban fantasy series, The Hunter Saga, for those who believe that vampires should be killed, not kissed. I also write the psychic detective series, Clear Angel Chronicles, and I have a young adult contemporary series that's about a high school girl that's being stalked.
Awesome. Lily?
I'm Lily Lucchesi. I'm the author of the Paranormal Detective series from Fantasy Publishing, as well as various other short stories. And the series follows a mortal detective who winds up finding the underworld of Chicago, which is the FBI who fight and also work with different paranormal creatures. And I'm about to release book 4, Right to Silence, on the 17th of January.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a big month for us.
Yes, it is.
You've got something coming out, right, Heidi?
Yes, the second book in the Hunter series comes out in February. That's right around the corner. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, well, you guys obviously write things that involve a lot of action, a lot of fighting, a lot of drama. So when I write the hunter, the half demon assassin that's my main character, I have a hard time avoiding sort of the cliched ways of pain. So I've tried to just steer way clear of them. And instead of showing the wounds that he takes, or instead of having him cry out, which is not a very manly thing to do.
What are you talking about?
he gets slowed down by the injuries, which is actually something that I learned in the swordsman panel. When you're fighting in the middle of the action, you often don't feel the pain because there's so much adrenaline and all of that. And it's only when you get a huge cut on the arm and you slow down that you realize, oh, I'm injured. How do you guys go about describing pain? What's your secrets, let's say?
I don't know if it's really a secret. I've grown up watching and reading a lot of horror, a lot of martial arts stuff. So when I'm writing the action, I'm just kind of watching it in my head. The things that I do more than anything else is I'll show the wounds, but it'll be from another character's point of view, where they're watching the other character receive the wounds. I have kind of a cheat with pain, where one of my characters is an immortal vampire, so she heals very quickly. So it's her dealing with the mortal's pain and how she has to watch him go through the things that she doesn't.
Interesting. Now let's delve into that a little bit. I often see other characters, like my characters see other characters in pain. How would you describe that? Because, you're supposed to avoid he saw, he felt, he heard, things like that pull you away from the character. So how do you approach those descriptors without using see, hear, feel, all of that?
I'll usually start the sentence with whatever character is in pain. It'll be Danny was writhing on the floor. Danny's shirt was in tatters, covered in blood. Something like that. So usually starting with the opposite character, it automatically makes you avoid the see, hear, feel.
Okay, so in a way showing the physical manifestations
yes.
of the pain.
Yes.
And I do the same thing. Even when I try to write the way I see things. And so when I see somebody bleeding on the floor, I don't say, I saw him bleeding on the floor. I say he was on the floor bleeding, and how I process what I see first. And usually for me, the first thing I notice is the sounds, or I'm not really a visual person. I'm more of an auditory person. And so I'll notice the sound of, like, when my husband cuts himself and gasps. I hear him gasp before I realize he's been cut. And that's what draws my attention to the injury. And then I go from there.
Interesting. Now let's say this is a character that, like, okay, all of my books are written from one point of view. So there's no hopping between characters. So my main character, the hunter, he sees his ally in pain. is there a way to describe that registering of the pain without saying he saw all of that? Like, it's from the hunter's point of view. So if you say, like, if you go between the characters in the same paragraph, it kind of sounds off, no? You're supposed to keep sort of a paragraph per character.
Right. Yeah, you want to stay in that. How do you know he's in pain? What is he physically doing to display that he's in pain? There's a grimace on the face. The muscles tighten. There's physical actions that allow your hunter to know that that character's in pain. It's not just that you see he's in pain. I mean, yes, you do, but there's all these little micro things that happen that you process to go, oh, he's in pain. That's how I know he's in pain. There's a grimace. There's a, the gasp. There's behaviors that indicate that there's pain. He's groaning. And you use those words and you describe what he's seeing that person do. But you don't have to say he saw, just my comrade groaned in pain, gripping his fists tight, knuckles white. And you don't even have to say groaned in pain. You can leave the in pain part out. He groaned, grasping his hand, knuckles white, to indicate how intense the pain is.
Right, or if they're, in the middle of a battlefield or a mission, like in your case it would be, or in mine, say he was limping along. Show it's a constant state of pain. Make sure you don't forget about that, a few paragraphs later, unless the character dies, of course.
Or they magically heal. No, I'm just
which would also be my way. I have such a terrible cheat sheet with that, where because the vampire can heal so quickly, it's almost not fair.
Yeah.
But that's actually half the fun. Like my character, he doesn't heal like instantly, but he heals fairly quickly, so he can take a wound and go on. So it's actually kind of fun to throw things at him that are beyond his healing powers, like burying him under a mountain or dropping him off a 1,000-foot cliff. Like it's sort of
heals, and then he gets hurt again, and then he heals, and then he gets hurt again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see that being fun.
Now physical pain. I think that's a little bit easier to other people's physical pain. It's easier to show through the voices, the sound effects and the facial expressions and all of that. Now let's talk about the less visible pain, be it like the mental pain of a headache or the emotional pain of an old memory that's painful. How do you show that in another character? Let's start off with another character.
Well, I actually find that kind of easy. I've studied psychology since I was 13, and I myself deal with multiple mental illness issues. So, and I know other people who do. So I think it depends on who the character is relating to your main character. There are certain things. You can see a trembling in their lip, the tears in their eyes could be red. They'll be more withdrawn, quieter than usual. If they're a loud character, it's almost. I know a lot of people are in mental pain or anxiety. They act the opposite of the way they usually act.
And then there's also, again, with those micro-inflections, there's things you'll notice a tremble in their voice. They may exhibit,
like I said, the trembling of the lips, and
they get tense when you mention the subject. They don't want to talk about it. They clam up. All of those are kind of cliche examples, but there's ways to express those. And that's one of the things that comes down to being, as a writer, you have to be a good observer. Not only of how you feel about things and analyzing what you think about things, but also analyzing how other people behave. And you have to build those things into your character because different people will react differently. And sometimes I like playing with the idea of the unexpected reaction. So like my male character in the Clear Angel Chronicles, he's a cop. He is really hardcore. He has this old school male, we don't cry, we don't show our feelings, we don't express our emotions. And so when Clear can feel those, see, I kind of cheat because she actually can feel his pain because she's psychic. It's so much more intense when she feels them from him, which is part of her frustration with having to deal with him, because if he would just let his emotions out, he wouldn't be so bottled up inside, and she wouldn't be so confused and frustrated every time she's working with him. And so, most people would think, oh, that character, those guys that act like that, they don't feel pain. But my brother is one of those guys. And when he does open up to people that he trusts, like me, he's actually more sensitive, more emotional than the regular guys who cry at sappy movies. But that's part of why he bottles it up, because he feels like if he shows that, then he's giving people a tool to use against him. And I kind of wonder if he doesn't feel those things more because he doesn't express them regularly.
Interesting.
So,
Now let's talk about the internal pain that the point of view character feels. For example, when the hunter, he has the ability to shift his shape, he gets like a mini seizure. Now there's only so many ways to describe seizure without the use of the word seizure and electricity. You know, because it's a medieval fantasy, you can't use either of those. So, you know, you're sort of limited in the descriptions you can use. So that sort of internal pain, a migraine headache, the sort of pain that comes from fibromyalgia, like what words or how do you deal with those types of internalized pains?
Well, that happens a couple of times to my characters. A lot of times it's holy water poisoning. So usually it depends on what the internal pain is. The most frequent word I'll use is a burning, a stinking, because holy water into a vampire's bloodstream is like pouring a bottle of peroxide. And you don't want to just say, oh, they poured a bottle of peroxide. You want to describe what that feels like, the bubbling, the burning, the intense. It almost feels like you want to claw your own skin off. And those are all phrases that I've used without trying to use the cliche claw your skin off, though I did use that once.
Do you ever find yourself reading over your manuscript in a later draft and saying, oh, wow, that's the 150th time in 5 pages that I've used that expression? Because I know I find that all the time. I went over the Hunters book 3, and I think I had like burning like 200 times. And so I had to go through it and get rid of most of them. But do you find yourself overusing certain words or expressions?
My first 2 books I did, both of my editors, I used 2 different ones in my first 2 books, and they both showed me what to look for while I'm writing my first draft. So that the last 2, I haven't had to do that as much. But yeah, my first 2 books, I had to go through and delete and try and find other words very frequently.
What about you, Heidi?
So as far as writing it, I actually, Clear Angel, in the second book, Angel's Dance, they go to Chicago, and when she's around a lot of people, she doesn't have any control over her psychic ability. She can't shut it out. And so when she's around a lot of people, she gets overwhelmed and she ends up with migraines. And I actually chose that because I was going through a period of time where I was just finishing school. I was raising 2 boys who hadn't even started school. I was working full-time, and my husband was working swing shift. And so I was under a lot of stress, and I was having a lot of migraines. And so I incorporated that into the story. And I'm a big proponent of writing what you know. I know exactly what a migraine feels like, and I don't use the cliche descriptions because every migraine is unique to the individuals who are having them. There's certain things that are similar that allow you to know you're having a migraine, but the feelings, the sensations, the responses. I have certain migraines where I know from the beginning of the migraine, whether I take my medication or not, I'm going to throw up. It doesn't matter. It's going to end that way. Okay. And then I have others where it's just a horrible headache for 3 days with the lights and the stuff. And so being able to describe those different levels of intensity and changing the way that it plays out helps a lot. Another thing that I use, I'm a really big fan of not self-editing when I write. I just go, and whatever comes out, comes out. I use he said, she said a lot. I use similar descriptions over and over, but there's this thing called Pro Writing Aid, and it's a great tool. I absolutely love it. You can use the free version. You can only use 500 words at a time if you use the free version, but you can check your manuscript for commonly used phrases, and it gives you commonly used 3-word phrases, 2-word phrases, 5-word, I think it goes up to 5 words. Or you can pay $40 for a year and use it and do your whole manuscript right there. And I love it because it tells me how many times I'm using it and how close they are together. So I can go in and change it out so that it's not overwhelming for a first-time reader. Because once you've read it 100 times, you're just like, oh, yeah, I used it, but it was not that long ago. But you're not going to go back and find when last time was that you used it. With this, you can see right there, oh, I just used that word literally the page before. Maybe I should change it in this one. Oh, I haven't used this in 5 pages. We can keep this one.
Right.
You know, so it gives you a kind of a bird's eye view of your script, which makes it easier.
Interesting.
Another thing I'm a big fan of is using, and when I say this, I want to just be very clear. Authors that don't have big vocabularies probably shouldn't do this because you'll use the words wrong. But I'm a big fan of using the internet to look up similar words. I only use words that I know. I'm a lexicomaniac. I have an obsession with words. I have an incredibly huge vocabulary, but I know so many words that I can't always think of the word I want. And so I'll look up the word and find a better word that I know would fit. If you don't know the word, don't just trust the internet's.
Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of like how Stephen King had said in his book, any word you have to go with the source for is the wrong word. When I'm writing, I am particularly loquacious, so I actually have to go back and do the opposite of what you said and get rid of some of the bigger words. They don't fit with my genre.
Right, and that's another thing you have to be careful of. You know, Stephen King was right when he says keep it simple, stupid, but only if you write certain genres. If you write thrillers, if you write romance, if you write, go ahead, be cliche, use the same words over and over again. They're not looking for complicated words. If you write epic fantasy and you don't use complex words, your readers are going to get mad. Yeah. They're going to be like, really? This felt dumbed down. And they don't want to feel like you're dumbing it down for them. Whereas most thriller readers and romance readers, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for complicated crap. They just want it simple. I
actually find that completely opposite with my readers because mine are paranormal thrillers.
But it's paranormal. Paranormal is different. And you know, that's one thing you have to keep in mind. That's why there's these subgenres. Paranormal thrillers, and that's what mine is too. They do like to be treated like they're intelligent.
Yeah, and you have to use a lot of terminology as well in thrillers, so you can't dumb that down. There's absolutely no way to do that.
On the thriller, yeah. There's hard thrillers and then there's soft thrillers. That's true.
That's true. What's something that's interesting is a few, I don't know, months, years ago on my blog, I posted this paper released by Lancaster University in the UK, and they talked about all the different descriptors for pain, and it's fascinating. There's pain as a sharp object, a tormenting animal, a fire, something that stabs, that's tearing and pulling, and it's a weight. Like, there's so many different ways to describe pain. It's really interesting, and you can really find different ways to describe it according to what you're writing. And you know, like I guess Heidi, you said that you don't always go with the same symptoms for the migraine. Sometimes it's the pain, sometimes it's the side effects, sometimes it's the different things. So in a way, coming up with the different approaches to the pain, be it the physical or internal pain of the characters, can be the same thing. Sometimes a wound feels like a stabbing, whereas another time it feels like a line of fire if it's a cut. You know, like getting creative.
And sometimes if it's a really sharp blade, you don't feel it at all until several minutes later.
That's true.
Right. Sometimes people, especially when you're in the middle of a fight, and one of my characters is a cop, so he recognizes the adrenaline. So immediately he won't feel it. He'll notice it afterwards, and he'll be like oh shit.
Interesting. Now, do you have any ways to describe pain that you feel is like unique to you?
I don't really have as much physical pain that would be unique. It's more emotional. Heidi was saying something earlier about writing what you know, and Danny, one of my two main characters, is also psychic. He's reincarnated, so I'm very empathic as well. So when I'm out in big crowds, I get it and feeling energy deep lethargy. And I use that, and that is very unique to like people. So when I'm trying to write him, I go back during the editing process and really make sure that I'm getting it accurately. So it's hard to describe something that not many people are able to feel.
Interesting. Heidi, what about you?
So I'm really big on, again, the smells. pain has unique smells, and people's reactions to pain have unique smells. When it's a piercing pain, there's an acidic smell to it. When it's a long-term pain, there's this kind of decay smell. And so I do incorporate a lot of the scents. That's actually one of the reasons I love The Hunters, or your series. Your character does a lot with more than just the visual. He does a lot with scent. And I could really connect to that because that's a key part for me too. I also do a lot of, describing the sound of ripping flesh.
Mm. Yes.
It's kind of creepy. But, I try. One of my reviewers said that reading The Hunters was like watching a movie because he felt like he was right there in it. And then that's because, one, I don't waste a lot of time with backstory. You're just thrown right into it and you catch up as you catch up. And then the other piece is that I do describe everything, so you know exactly what they see, feel, sense, hear, and what they smell. And so it's very interactive.
Yeah, I think auditory as well is a huge part of being descriptive, because I'm usually writing from the point of view of the character causing pain instead of receiving it. So yeah, like how you said, the tearing of the flesh, popping of eyeballs, the ripping of the clothes before you get to the flesh. I have a scene coming up, 2 different scenes where a character's trying to kill a vampire and the head won't come off. So he actually has to rip while he cuts with his blade, and that was a lot of fun to write, and that's very auditory more than anything else.
Yeah, I have a scene in the first Hunter's book where a vampire rips the girl's heart out of her chest, and the character's running to save her, and he hears her ribs break. He hears the sound of the heart being ripped, and then he hears the squelching as the last bit of blood's pumped out of her chest, or out of her heart.
I just got to that part.
It's a very intense scene.
Yeah.
My son read that and he was like, "Mom, you are really sick." And I was like, "Why are you reading my book? This is not for you." I've been trying to keep him away from it for 4 years now. I lost the battle.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything you want to add? Any talking points along the topic?
Well, I think the main thing that a lot of people, they write about but don't talk about is the healing from pain. More emotional than physical, because once you've dealt with the physical pain and that's over, oftentimes you are left with an emotional aftermath, a post-traumatic stress disorder type. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget about. I was just reading something where they talked about the Harry Potter series where they left out the PTSD that Harry would obviously have being a child in the middle of war. Mm-hmm. And in my next book, Right to Silence, Angelica goes through a severe torture and abuse session. I don't describe all of it, just a little, but the main thing I wanted to point out was how to heal and how to deal with the emotional aftermath, because the emotional pain will kill you worse than the physical pain.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess that's one thing that as an author, in my books, because the hunter heals, pain isn't so much a long-term issue for him. He takes a pretty serious wound and 5 minutes later he's walking away, kind of thing. So there's not
right. Yeah, what she goes through is actually a 3-week torture session with demons.
Right.
So she finally comes out of it for the first time in 200 years. She has post-traumatic stress. She has flashbacks, and I show a bit of the breakdown that she has in the shower, because vampire tears in my story are blood. So when she sees herself crying, she thinks that gets a flashback of all her blood falling out of her while they're cutting her open. And yeah, it's just something that a lot of people do need to remember when they're writing pain. That there is stuff that comes afterwards.
And then in also the physical side of things, you take a broken bone. I've broken both my arms at different points in my life, and it took 6 weeks just to get out of the cast, 8 weeks in some cases. And then, you got to spend months of rehab. Actually, in my new book, Child of the Night Guild, she spends like 3 months recovering from an injury to her little finger, because that's how long the delicate bones of the hands take to heal and to go back to normal, recover full strength. So that's one thing that I know I've just not thought about that until recently, because the hunter doesn't, he doesn't have long-term pain.
Yeah.
But then that recovery time, like I know in a ton of movies and fantasy epics, you know, there's a battle scene and the hero takes a wound and the next day he's back in the line and there's no side effects. I mean, even Lord of the Rings, which is like a classic, there's a lot of that. The characters take wounds and they're running along the next day, you know. So that the recovery, the rehab part of pain is an important part of the process, just like the actual inflicting of the wound.
Yeah. I think another thing that's really important is that you need to connect the pain you're writing to something you know. A lot of authors that I read, especially like, you know, they're like, oh, well, how do you do that? You've never been shot, right? So all you have to rely on is what you read about other people's experiences. But at the same time, have you never experienced a puncture wound? Can you not expand that? I've never been cut by a sword, but I've cut my finger with a sharp knife. And being able to take from that and then extrapolate out from it is really important. Perfect example. I get really frustrated when I watch scenes or read scenes about childbirth, because I went through childbirth and their descriptions, obviously this reader, this author, this writer, this actress has never given birth to a child. You don't understand what you are displaying at all. You watch The Miracle of Birth and you think that's how it really works. But guess what? That's not how it really works at all. So that's just one simple example. And if you can't write from what you know, then talk to somebody who has been through it, because that's a personal experience and they can give you that background that you wouldn't have to be able to describe and really use that. And that's a good way to avoid cliches.
That's good. I like that. Well, that's our time. Thank you guys so much for joining in. I feel so educated now.
Thanks for having me.
Us.
If you want to find out more about Lily and Heidi, check out the comments below and click their links. Have a great day.